Well, hello and welcome to MLS Matters, hosted by CMLS. We appreciate you taking your time today to spend with us and hear from some of our panelists today, share their thoughts, and then also joining in the conversation in our roundtables afterwards. Today's session is being recorded like the previous ones and will be posted to the CMLS website along with summary notes of today's call. We definitely encourage sharing, and if you missed any of the previous ones, please feel free to watch those and share them with anyone you think might find them helpful. We are using Zoom, so everyone is entering and you were on, we're using Zoom so everyone can talk, and we ask that you mute if you're not speaking, but we are using it that way so that you can talk if you would like to. And just as a note, we have enacted all Zoom recommended safety protocols. So with that, welcome. My name is Danae Evans, the CEO of CMLS, and I'm very excited to talk about, to have a panelist today and talk about making the data work for you. That's today's topic. And it's been very interesting to think about and talk about how we're approaching it in today's world and what we're using it for, who's using it, how we're talking about it. It's just been a completely different approach and perspective on it. So what I'd like to do is start by having our panelists introduce themselves, where they're from. And I did do this last week, but it made me smile, it made me laugh. And I think right now we can bring in a little bit of happy and smiles. If I could ask my panelists to please introduce them, their companies, but then tell us your one quarantine guilty pleasure or fun, or just here's my tip of the day, you got to try this. So all right, Tom, would you kick us off with that? I got to tell you, Tom's, my favorite of Tom's, his razor is in a shelter-in-place order. I love that. And anytime I see someone with a bird, that's what I think of. So I'm sorry if I stole that. But anyways, go ahead.
One. So I'm guessing you can see, and hopefully, can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm using a computer engaged speaker on my desktop. Hopefully that sounds good. Tom Hurtlebrink. I am the president and CEO of Living Service. We're based in the Seattle suburbs. Western Washington State. Of 23 counties. Every broker firm in those counties is a member of MLS. 30,000. 31,000 drivers right now. We also we're directors of the real estate forms for Washington State, and we deliver in fashion to about 37 or 38 licensees, almost everyone licensed in Washington. We do this a partnership with Washington Realtors, and they've been a great partner coronavirus era as well. In terms of corona, our player, it's been almost 30 years since I talked. 35-year-old, late 70s, Takami, actually 40 years now. So a rare, nice guitar. I'm almost afraid to play it. So instead, I just, I live in a very nice home in a east side of Seattle called Woodinville. Woodinville is the wine center of Washington for retail purposes. We have 120 tasting rooms, 7 distilleries, and a dozen breweries. And it's pretty nice when 5 to 6 o'clock rolls around. Very hard to find some relaxation in Woodinville, Washington. And we've had a killer spring, sun almost every day, and I'm able to shelter in our. Oh, it's been spectacular. I'm lucky to have had that. Anyway, that's it.
That sounds lovely. I appreciate you sharing. And then Michael, how about you go next?
Thanks today. I am Michael Lane. I'm the president of Showing Time. I live here in Chicago at our corporate office. I wish I could say it's been beautiful and sunny every day. Today it is snowing and we got 3 inches of snow last night. It always snows once in April in Chicago, and it happened to be today, so it's a little bit nuts. But many of the MLS people, I've been with Showing Time for 20 years as one of the founding team members. And it's been really interesting times because now more than ever, we've been able to focus on kind of our market reporting part of our business. So, we provide showing products to MLSs, but 5 years ago, we got into market reports by buying a couple of companies that were used pretty widely in the industry, and we've found new clients for those. But they've all come to us with new needs. Our clients have come to us with new needs in the last month or so, particularly around seeing showing activity in their market. So I think we'll get to that here in a little bit. Guilty pleasures, working at home. I'm losing my mind. I don't know about everybody. Two little ones at home, and God, I love them, but I realize how much harder it is to work at home when they're here all day. There hasn't been a day that's gotten by when they haven't pounded on the door to my room, or I'm on a webcast or something. Well, I've got somebody really important on the line, and that's just part of the routine, though. But we're adapting and overcoming it. So that's about it for me.
Well, if any time happening, this is the time everyone's patient with it. So,
Yeah, that's right.
We'll go with it. All right, Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Jensen. I am the CEO of MRED, which is also in the suburbs of Chicago. So it was funny because I've got two sons that are 13 and 15, and made them mow the lawn yesterday just so that it could snow 3 inches on it today. And it makes it look great. So it definitely is springtime, but it was really pretty this morning, I thought, with all the trees being covered in snow. But so guilty pleasures would be, I'm teaching those same teenage boys how to play poker. So we've had a Texas Hold'em night. We've had we have chips, and so I am not winning. My 13-year-old.
Who's emerging as the lead star there?
Yeah, my 13-year-old. He swept it. So I'm like, hey, cool. So it's been fun.
Nice. I'm appreciating the creativity of how to stay active and just go about things a little differently. So, well, with that, let's jump right in and talk about working with data today. All right, I got my little list of questions here for everybody. One, we wanted to start a little bit kind of back at the beginning, and where most of us are through this, but I still think there's some questions that are coming up and some people still dealing with this. Tom, I think you were really active and one of the very first involved with real estate being considered essential or non-essential, and you worked with your brokers and your city officials and a whole lot of different stakeholders to get to that decision. So maybe talk just a little bit about what that was like, being involved with those decisions. But I think if you could share a little bit of how is that playing out today? Because I've been hearing people talking about, well, not only was real estate as, classified as essential or not essential, but then what other parts are needed to make that happen, right? So is it appraisers and inspectors and all those things that are still keeping it going? And just what role is your MLS still playing in that from where you did in the beginning?
Yeah, I'll go back in time a little bit. I have a timeline by day, and I did not provide that document to look at, but it's a full page plus more of every day of what at Northwest MLS we're doing or encountering, and then communicating to our members, and it goes to March 5th. And if I remember right, I was at the CoreLogic meeting in Arizona, the end of February, and the weekend following that Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I have 3 millennial-aged children who all flew in to spend a long weekend with my wife and myself in Arizona. I also have a sister that lives there, and we like to check in, buddy, and it's kind of become a tradition over the years. Great way to double dip on a conference day, which we've all figured out. And we were talking at that time about the fact that we were well aware of this virus in China, and then all of a sudden in Seattle, there was news that in a nursing home, 1 mile from my office in Kirkland, Washington, was the ground zero of the first reported multiple incidences of COVID-19. So 1 mile to my office is the nursing home, and 1/4 mile to the east of my office, the hospital those people were being taken to and dying. It was very ominous feeling coming back from that conference the first week of March and understanding what was going on. So we started publishing March 5th guidelines for our members to be thinking about regarding COVID-19. Within a week, by Monday, we disabled for us to move.
Hey, Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your sound is getting a little spotty. I'm wondering if you maybe turn off your video, if that will help with the sound. Let's try that. Because you kept freezing you. You were having some really good facial expressions, though.
Do I stop video? Okay.
Just at the bottom right, there's just hit stop video, but it should leave your mic on.
I will do that. So does that turn?
Well, your face is gone, but can you go ahead and keep talking?
Yeah, I'll keep talking.
Okay. I think that might have fixed it.
Thank you. Well, anyway, we started talking to our prominent broker members the first week of March. The 16th, we got approval from the in-house feature we use the Corsic matrix system. Published a business guide for showings and doing in-person interactions. And the 17th, we did a press. The 19th, we created a force majeure document because we knew that going to be issues getting transactions through the because of concerns about not meeting closing times or the other things that are elements of your contractual terms. And then the weekend of March 21 and 23.
So I'll get Kim on the
governor
line here in a second, but I wanted to tell you
in
something.
Washington.
I've already told her. So Debbie Way called me this morning, and
I
she's
can
like,
hear Anne Marie.
There we go. We got the mute on.
Anyway, March 23rd, the governor in Washington, that was a Monday, announced that we would have our stay-home order or a shelter order. Order was called Stay Home, Stay Healthy. So we spent quite a bit of time coordinating with our largest broker, with legislatures in Washington, with Washington Realtors, who has a direct communication link with the governor, of course, and other influential lobbying firms, and the King County Realtors and some of the others. And we were all sort of, because we're a broker-owned MLS, we're not connected officially to the Realtor Association. For MLS, we have an in-house attorney, outside attorneys, and we do a lot of consulting and relating in government affairs with Washington Realtors. So it's a very strong, positive relationship. We've probably had, in fact, I have a folder with over 200 emails between Washington Realtors and my leadership team in coordinating a response to the stay home, stay healthy order that became effective midnight 20. And so we were looking at data for a week or so for that to understand. We do a press release like many of you do for your monthly statistics or something like that. And we saw that the early part, the February and early March, we had a market that was as strong or stronger than any market we've ever had. And a couple
And
of
to be
years
clear,
ago,
Tom, that was early March. Is that what you were describing?
yes, early March.
It was one of the best months you were on track for.
We were on track for maybe the craziest market ever.
Wow.
Our inventory was in March before the all hit 30% below the inventory of last year, which was a record number of homes for sale. And our market times were shrinking again below 1 month for market for the greater Puget Sound area. We were seeing escalate clauses again in contracts. We talked to some brokers about the number of showings, and this is where this all is the showings and access to keys and key boxes.
So is this the screen that's on right now, Tom?
Yes, if
Okay.
the screen up there, this will get us into the started looking at. Not only am I going to walk you through a little bit of this, but just to put it in perspective, and it will admit, Seattle, the greater Seattle area has a spectacularly successful economy for the last 10 years. We are the younger brother or sister to Silicon Valley. So every strong, large technology firm in the Bay has to host for the largest body of employees. We already have our own Microsoft and Amazon and Starbucks and Costco and Boeing, but Google, Facebook are also here, and we're the second largest employee base for those firms. Apple moved 5,000 jobs here in the past 2 years, and it's going to grow. The hiring here is unbelievable. We have an unbelievably growing economy. What that means is we're supporting high income, technology-oriented employees. So that's where our
Tom,
demand for yeah.
I'm going to ask, we're getting a couple of pings that we're still having a hard time with. It's better, your sound is a little bit better, but it's still getting a little bit spotty. So I'm going to ask if maybe it's possible that you could, I'm going to have Betsy ping you to see if maybe we can disconnect you and reconnect you to get a little bit better connection.
Okay.
And see, just because it is a little bit spotty, I have a couple questions coming in on that. So, because I want to hear the rest of these, but while you do that, if I can maybe ask Rebecca to start a little bit on some of the data that she's seeing post this. I think that her talking a little bit of the data since then. And then Tom, we'll bring you back in as soon as we can, if we can try and get that fixed a little bit, because while it's probably 90% and it was about 70 before, so we'll make improvements each time.
I'll log then. Okay.
Okay, we'll bring you back in.
Yeah, and I have too. I didn't know exactly what side of data because there's so much to talk about, and I know that we have a limited amount of time. So I've got two sort of things that I could talk about. One is days on market and kind of future forward. And then the other one, I just saw Kelly put in the chat comments, which is the reports that MRED has already done and released weekly. So
where I would like to go, I think if we can hit a little bit of those two, some of the high marks, is just what I'm hearing a lot from MLS is how they're looking at data differently in the way of slicing and dicing, where it used to be we would look at monthly or quarterly data sets, and now there's MLSs producing daily reports. And I think I spoke with Rebecca from your team last week in one of the breakouts of how you're looking at just pulling it together a little bit differently because it needs to be so immediate. And
so then can I have you put up that link that's in the chat, and I can just show that real quickly so I can because that speaks directly to your question. And then if we could switch back to the RESO stuff, I'd love
Sure.
to be able to talk about that too. But
I think Kelly can make that happen here. So maybe if you want to just start speaking to a little bit why she switches over, I'm sure it's a little tricky between screens, but if you want to start
Sorry.
talking to that a little bit, why she does it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think that having more actionable information on the statistics side is absolutely vital during these times, because people not only want to know what's happening, but everybody is in such a time of flux as far as making predictions. I mean, a lot of people are comparing this to either 9/11 or to the 2007-2008 crisis. And so the big question is it, you know, how much is it like either one of those events, or are we going to see something completely different? And so that's why after the governor of Illinois put in a stay-at-home order, if you scroll down here, there is a box. Thank you. There we go. And there's just 7 slides. We update this weekly so that people can see what's happening across the MRED marketplace. So our marketplace serves over 45,000 real estate professionals across the greater Chicagoland area, and like moving south into the state of Illinois. So if you click on that little arrow to the right at the bottom, it just kind of scrolls through some of our statistics. Say again?
You're grabbing this. This is a weekly report.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
and then our users can, like, if you just mouse over any of those bars at the top, then they can actually see like the actual data point if they want to. So they can really track, and not just the new listings and under contract, but just as the requests come through, either via email or, you know, our help desk or just anyone, we try to create a report that isn't too cumbersome to update on a weekly basis, but also gives the right balance of information. If you scroll again, one of these talks about our different statuses. That was a change that we made pretty quickly after getting the stay-at-home order. Is, you know, some people said, hey, what about the days on market, which is another whole topic that I don't know if we'll have time to talk about, but that I would love to, because I know that many MLSs definitely had the question about, you know, do you pause days on market? Do you hide it? What do you do with it? And a lot of MLSs also talked about different statuses. Should we do a special status? You know, how is it handled, especially as it applies to days on market? And so our board made a change to policy pretty quickly by saying that if our subscribers put their listings into what we call a temporary status, many MLSs call it a hold status, that it would not count days on market. But as I dug into the way that days on market were calculated within the MRED system, it quickly became apparent to me that we can do better. And I know it's been a topic at RESO for a couple years now. And so I guess I'm in good company with people wanting to also improve the way that the industry at large calculates days on market. So that's as a PowerPoint presentation I sent. If we want to get into that later, that's great. But I think for now, those are the 2 things that we're focusing on, our weekly stats and then looking for a better way to do days on market.
And maybe if you can take just a couple minutes before we go to Michael and just tell us what CMLS did issue recommendation to not mess with days on market. Don't stop counting it. And so that was a few weeks back, and it sounds like you have a few more thoughts since that has happened, and there's been some additional conversations, obviously. So if you want to take a couple minutes and talk about that.
Sure.
Before we go over to Michael, and then we'll see if we got Tom back with a voice.
So, and I'm happy to share this, or if you want to share it out, whatever. RESO actually did a survey on days on market. It's linked there. We don't necessarily have to go into it other than to say that it was a good job. And so they asked about how all the different ways that MLSs are describing or calling days on market. I thought Tim the Enchanter was pretty clever, but I don't know about PDOM. I'm like, that sounds like peed on, but I don't know who uses that. And that's part of my rant here is like, what is PDOM? Is that price days on market? Is it pending days on market? Like, it drives me crazy sometimes about how acronym heavy our industry is, and it's not consumer friendly. And then, not to make matters worse, but it does, like each one of these things has a totally different calculation probably than the neighbor next to you. And so if you do the next slide, I'm trying to remember my slides, but there are a few different papers that and documents that have been created. Rob Larson with California Regional MLS created a paper on it that talks about all the different ways that MLSs have come up with over the years. He doesn't really go into any recommendations about it, but just it was a good synopsis. I thought he did a good job in at least describing how days on market are being approached by different MLSs. And he is the chair of the RESO work group for the data dictionary. And the next version of the data dictionary, not the current one, but one that they're currently working on, will have at least 3 different fields that will be part of that new specification: days on site, simple days on market, which is a straight calculation on the listing date in the MLS to the close date, and then a field called days in MLS. And so RESO really just talks about how you spell the fields, and if an MLS has something, they can put that into it. But this is me, Rebecca Jensen. I'm not, even though I'm wearing the CMLS shirt and I'm the RESO chair, this is just my personal thoughts. So I just want to make that. But I think that the industry as a whole just needs to go back to the basics and say, okay, how are these fields being used? And so when I was thinking through it, and I think there's the next slide, I kind of broke it down by the different user types. And because listing agents will often have conversations with their sellers talking about, you know, pricing and condition of that property, and how if you don't correlate both of those right, it's going to result in longer days on market on a property. And in some markets, days on market can be toxic. Probably that's not the case in like Tom Hurtlebrink's market, but it really depends on the market. I have seen some listing agents use days on market at stat as their resume, saying, hey, I can get your house sold, look at mine versus the average. Buyer's agents absolutely use days on market to figure out what the offer price should be when they're going to place an offer on the property, because if they know that it's a hot market and a house has been sitting there for a while, you know, is there something wrong with the condition? Is it really the agent? Brokerages use the statistic to manage their agents to see if they're doing their job right, especially as it applies not just to the showing segment, but then the other part of days on market when it talks about like, how long has it been under contract? How are their internal brokerage processes? Maybe they have lenders that take too long. So it's being used a different way from a business context. And then obviously all of us look at it to analyze market statistics. And so I just think that we need to, as an industry, kind of come together and come up with some different ways to measure days on market, preferably something that does not result in some new acronym that's horrible, you know?
Why not?
I know, right? It drives me crazy when I'm trying to see how things are calculated, especially as across markets. We all feed them out, and then they don't really mean the same thing, even though the identical words are being used across markets. So that's part of my rant. I'm not sure if I have. Oh, so yeah, I think I'm hosting one of the breakouts, and then also next week is the RESO remote conference, which there is going to be a roundtable talking about this as well. But I'm just kind of thinking that, is it time for, I don't know if this would be CMLS or RESO or just individually MLSs reaching out to each other, but I was thinking that maybe a different reporting section on days on market would be good. What would it look like to have a pie chart that shows the number of days a listing was able to be shown versus not shown as one metric? How long was it taking to close these deals as like a mortgage metric? And just really come up with a way that is consumer friendly to address each one of the use cases that we see here, so that we can actually use not just the RESO data dictionary changes that are coming up, but really give the tools back to our brokers as MLSs to analyze what happened in the market. And if we're going to be doing it anyways and making changes to statistics, can we actually make what we currently have better? And that's what I'm hoping that we can do.
Now, you would not be the first MLS exec who has mentioned, in fact, someone was like, if you could just come up with the standard way to calculate it across the country, I would love that. I was like, that's a big task. But
Yeah.
I think it's one, especially right now. I did an interview a week or two ago, and they asked, well, what's the benefit of having a days on market calculation? And my answer was like, I'm not qualified to answer it, but it's because what's on the screen. It means something different to each one of the participants in there, and they're all going to have their own, and they use it differently. So yeah, thanks for breaking that down. That's some really great points, and I think that does warrant some additional conversation for sure.
Cool.
And then the other piece where we did talk about your data, I will just share that I'm trying to talk to many different MLSs of what they're doing and how they're looking at it. But I really, the difference of slicing that data down to, I talked to Dave Wetzel at MLS Listings yesterday. He's literally issuing daily reports, like what is happening. And then some, like Rebecca, you're showing a weekly report, and just how differently we're having to look at it and share it with your subscribers so that they can really still inform their customers, right? That they've got what's currently happening, because as Tom was saying in the beginning, March was on track to be the biggest, the biggest month they've had, and now you're going to show this. Well, it needs more context. So, with that, thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate you sharing that insight. And I haven't got confirmation Tom's back, but Michael, if you could share with us, Showing Time has started tracking and producing a resource for the industry that I think has been a lot of help with what's going on in the way of showings within the country. So if you could tell us a little bit about how you guys decided to do this, obviously probably some quick change to get all this together, and how do you think it's helping the industry or supporting it, or what are you hearing back from people? You
got it. I will, I'll be happy to talk about this, as well as a couple of related things that have been really relevant lately. As soon as, or let me back up a second. We've, for several years, published a report that we call the Showing Index, which has just been trends in showings across the US by NAR regions. And that's been something we posted on our site. It was a report that we did monthly, and we'd have one for each area of the US, 4 altogether, and then one national report. And we would just look at the trend in showings month over month, and we would show it compared to last year. So you could see, generally a leading indicator of what's going on in the industry. And start of the coronavirus, we started getting regular requests from our clients that say, hey, is there any chance you could do a showing index for our local market? But any chance you could update it, nightly? And we started when we had the first request, which I think was from a client in New York. And when I say clients, I mean MLSs, or realtor associations, and came from one in New York. And we started by just doing an export and sending it to them. And their response was, wow, any chance you could do that every day? And I think it was when we got our 4th one of those in a single day, we said, okay, this is probably going to be something really important. How are we going to do this in a scalable way? Gets the information out fast, that doesn't totally cripple our company from doing, our day-to-day business. And what we decided to do was to create a set of indices that we would put on our site, and we would update nightly. And we simplified the calculations a little bit, so it wasn't such a computation-heavy report to create. And we decided that, our thumb rule as a company has been, as long as we anonymize the data, so you can never see any data that's specific to an individual agent, listing, or home that's for sale. But even at the MLS level, we don't put MLS names on our site. We keep that private, and we provide that report to them to publish to their members. But at the state level was kind of the place where we typically have a couple of MLSs in each state. So that was something that we could put on our site. So if you look at it, you'll see that what we do is we take the ratio of showings on any given day and we compare that to the first week of the year. So we have a 7-day running average number of showings versus the first full week of the calendar year, which filters out, we don't use absolute showings because there are all kinds of things that could affect absolute showings, such as members just getting used to the system more. We really wanted to have some sort of a clean way to do it that is easy to understand. So basically we take the average number of showings in the last 7 days, we ratio it to the first week of the year. So that's on the vertical axis on the left. And we superimpose it over where we were last year using the exact same calculation. And we only did it in markets where we had tens of thousands of showings happening each month. There's markets on our website that we have data, but we didn't feel like it was quite enough to publish with a, responsibly. So you see almost every state has it, and it's just been incredibly interesting. In fact, I don't know if it was a coincidence that Tom and I were on the same panel, because Seattle was the one that when we built it, that I watched every day because it was the earliest one to see the impact in showings. And I called him and we talked, I guess it was probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago. We talked about it and I asked his permission if we could, point news writers to it, because I was getting a lot of inquiries from people that wanted to write news stories and how this is an early indicator. And it's just been an incredibly sticky thing to look at. So now we have most states published with tons of data, and you can toggle through each state and see, whose showings are still going down, whose really have not been affected as much as you might think. I mean, there are states where there's really not a huge impact being seen year over year on their showing activity, like Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota, for example. They're off, but nothing on the order of magnitude that we see in like states like New York and Florida. So it's just super interesting to look at. Super interesting, like an ambulance is super interesting to look at when you're driving down the highway. You can't not look at it. But the good news is that we've kind of hit the lowest that we're seeing in any markets. There are very few markets that are getting any worse. And we are starting to see positive signs in almost every market. I'm just going to say we're going to publish what we see nightly on our site. But, I want to be the first to say I am seeing positive things happening when almost a daily basis, I just for fun toggle through all the markets to see what's going on. And most markets, you are starting to see a positive change occurring. I think it's, which is a combination of a couple of things. I think people are trying to figure out how to do business despite the fact that there is a quarantine, which is virtual or video showings, and they still use showing time to schedule those.
That was my question, Michael. Can you talk a little bit about that? Are you able to track that? Do we need to think about that as MLSs? Where's that new virtual piece tying in?
I think, we're seeing innovation coming out of pain here. Realtors want to keep doing business, and it varies from one state to the next on whether real estate is essential. Where I live, Illinois, real estate is an essential service. So agents are still doing their business. And coincidentally, I'm really in the eye of the storm here because we signed a listing agreement 3 days ago and our home is going on the market. And every night after the kids go to bed, we're looking for a new home and we're strategizing, how is days on market going to penalize us? How do we play this perfectly? But, my philosophy is that, I want to be on the market as soon as there are some positive indications, and I will be the ultimate guinea pig in conducting a live video tour of my home to anybody that's interested. And I guarantee there will be people like us that, are dead set on moving and, one way or another. So virtual showings, the words on that we're choosing carefully because it means different things to different people. Virtual in my mind has often been associated with kind of lots of photos on a listing to give you a kind of a virtual or panoramic experience of the property, but it doesn't automatically trigger a live type of experience that I would associate with showing. But we did find, that we had many clients saying, hey, we can't, by order of the governor, we cannot conduct in-person showings, and we want to keep your system live. How can you help? So we added it, and showing type, we have a pick list when agents make appointments. They can now select virtual showing, which we leave it up to the agents to decide exactly what that means to them, because it varies from one market to the next. But generally it means that it's not going to be an in-person showing, but we do want to reserve a time to either get on FaceTime, to have someone at the property show us the interior of the property, to give the buyer the ability to see something beyond what they could get on the public website or through like a data update that they get from their agent. And agents are embracing that. We see thousands of appointments being made each day under the flag virtual showing. So there was pressure from the market wanting that. The next thing we're going to do is in the next couple of weeks, we're going to set it up so a listing agent can indicate whether they are open to in-person showings only, virtual showings only, or either virtual or in-person showings, so that the two sides can kind of match up to each other as conveniently as possible. And we're going to give them tools if they want to do a virtual or video showing to insert links so that all the parties can conveniently figure out how to get into their, whether it's Zoom meeting or whatever platform they decide to use at the designated time. But that has become a really popular thing, and I'm optimistic, or I think that will probably stick after coronavirus goes away as a way to view a home. As I think back when I went through the buying process years ago, that first day where you look at a lot of different homes and you do quick showings is really tedious, and you kind of weed it down to a shorter list. I could totally see how in the future that's going to be a pretty common way that people request to schedule showings. It takes all of the coordination, perhaps even more than showings previously, because you've got to figure out when everybody's free. You got to figure out how it's going to work, and you got to figure out which technology you're going to use to share the experience online, whether it's Zoom or some other one. So that's become a really big deal.
Michael, I had a question come in for you. It says, will those in-person showings be filtered by state? Example, stay-at-home order, real estate is not essential.
If I'm not sure that I understand the question. So are you saying like if you're in a border area, would it indicate that you could do it in one state and then not in?
Yeah, I think it's like overlapping what's the local requirements. Like if it's not available, will it be criteria based on the local ordinances or mandates? I think is what I'm understanding.
Our goal is to set the tools up, but then defer to the local governance to decide how they use it. So they'll need to be, it's not going to automatically know what.
And it's changing so quickly too. I feel like that would be really
so hard
challenging.
To do it.
I'm hearing MLS association saying they're like, it's changing on them all the time. So
it's changing on like a weekly basis what the rules are and how. So we want to do it right. We don't want to throw something out too quickly and have to take it down, which we did. We learned from experience. We had a lot of pressure from people to say, hey, can you put a checkbox in the appointment maker to ask if either the buyer or the buyer's agent have been exposed or are known to have COVID-19, have been exposed to it, or if they, we've seen it all, but had you been overseas recently? And they wanted people to check the boxes, and we did kind of a light version of it. And then we immediately got calls from loyal clients who were like, guys, that was a terrible idea. What don't know they have coronavirus, and they go and something happens. So we took that down after less than 24 hours and replaced it with by making a showing, please be aware of best practices. We didn't make like a legal, thing that I do not have coronavirus, so I'm okay to come to you.
No, that makes sense. Rebecca, did I see that you were wanting to add something to that?
Yeah, just as far as like the vendor response has been great, not just with Showing Time, which we're a happy customer of theirs, but also we have seen other vendors respond. For example, Remind has recently launched some new features on their Remind Pro platform that is all about being able to facilitate those live open houses and those live streaming. RESO is working on a standard name. And then we've also heard from HomeSnap that they are also adding the functionality to do similar things for MLSs to be able to feed those fields so they go out to the portals. I know that Zillow, I've heard some things. So I think, again, it's important to understand what all the different people in the industry are doing so that we can kind of have a concerted effort and understand what not only the options are, but if you're thinking about implementing things, know what's already been done
available,
so you can learn from that.
And I think to build on that, Rebecca, and we'll close out here and go into our breakout rooms, but Michael said that there will be some new behaviors in this, and I very much think that this will be a piece of it. So make sure MLSs, as we're looking at these decisions and what to implement and what's available, that we're thinking strategically and long-term about it. How do we make sure that as these behaviors become habits and maybe new norms, that they're still looking to the MLS to go to do these types of things? They're not, the habit doesn't become that they're looking outside and they go to Instagram to, or FaceTime Live. How is it still the channel through the MLS in which to access this search and this process and these open houses? So I'd ask you to keep that on your thoughts as you navigate this. And then
Hey, Danae.
Yes, and then Tom.
So sorry, I was technically inept. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Can I ask for 3 minutes of time, maybe 4 minutes of time here?
3 will work, so we still have time so people can go in the breakout rooms for sure.
Would you be able to put up the image I sent you guys about our key boxes? Because, okay. So quick story here. First of all, thank you for letting me come back on. In Washington, we, on March 26th, real estate was considered non-essential. So that was part of the original stay home order. So that was very interesting to track data. And as Michael Lane said, he and I were talking, had been talking before about the showing time statistics. And we were going from not really paying that much attention to all of a sudden paying a lot of attention. And when real estate was considered not essential, which meant you couldn't show houses, we got a clarification that said you couldn't show a house, but you could finish a transaction. So anything impending could move forward, but no one could go into the home, not a professional. So how could you close? So we saw the showing time activity drop a little bit, but we saw key box accesses drop dramatically. And that's what this is. So we get a regular report from Supra weekly. We now get data daily. So I just want to sort of reiterate almost what Michael and Rebecca were, that it's interesting to see how fast people can respond, and it's making us pay more attention about being sort of real-time data centric, not only for the MLS, for our members, and enabling this kind of material to them. By the way, within 3.5 days, real estate was then determined to be essential with restricted activities that were very tightly defined. And we saw key box activity fall by more than 50% from 1 week to the next. And ever since then, we went up almost 20% the following week. Then the next week, another 22% in activity of showings. But even though that feels good, we compared these numbers to the prior year when we had an equally pretty strong market, as I was saying, in Seattle. And our key box accesses to homes is still less than 50% of what they were in what we would have called a normal March and April market last year due to the coronavirus. But that's growing at an increasing rate, partly because, and actually with showing time, we went from about a 35 to 40% adoption in the end of January to an over 65% adoption on all listings with showing time by the third week of March. And people are doing individual appointments and accessing the key boxes with a little more regularity because they can't do an open house here in Washington. So we're seeing people do more individual appointments, and now people are going back to the house, the broker, to film a virtual open house as well. So we see this is, it's very insightful to see the numbers, but then you have to understand the reasons behind the numbers. But anyway, just another data point, and appreciate everybody else's contributions. So
Yeah.
thank you.
I appreciate you coming back on, Tom, and I'm sorry there was the sound issue, but I'm glad you came back and shared that with us. And so in closing, we will go to, I just want to congratulate the industry, because as all of you have mentioned, every participant, every vendor, MLS, everybody is like really working hard together to innovate, to support, to keep it moving forward. And that is just like, to me, that's like a huge win and success out of this really crazy, not great time. And I think the summary of today's call is just how MLSs and partnering with the different vendors are becoming more real-time data providers for their members to provide this insight in just a completely different way than we've looked at it before. So I would say if maybe this next week, if you all take that new lens as you approach your organizations and supporting your members. So with that, again, this is our resource page. You guys, I would all encourage you and recommend you go there for past recordings, summaries, any other resources that we have, please go there. And then from here, we are going to launch our roundtables. We've got facilitators. You can continue talking on these topics. You can talk on anything else that may be of concern or of interest, or just to see the smiling faces of your colleagues and peers. I've had lots of people tell me that that is just as exciting as the topic. So thank you all again for participating, and we look forward to seeing you again next Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific. Thank you, and have a really great weekend as best as you can. Thank you.